Hi, my name is Christian Askeland. I'm senior researcher at Museum of the Bible, director of education at Inspire. Really pleased to be here.
Dr. Askeland, good to see you again today.
Back at you.
Yeah, you're looking good, looking smooth there. Now I am wearing a Hawaiian shirt. You're wearing like coat and tie kind of thing. I mean, you look really good, but this is just audio. Just have to imagine how good you look there.
Just imagine me looking a lot better than him.
There you go. There you go. Now, one of the things that this is about, this exegetically speaking, is about biblical languages. And biblical languages cover a particular time of history and certain text and everything. But you're an expert as well in Coptic. I want to take a few minutes to talk about what is Coptic and what benefit, if we were to study Coptic, what kinds of things could we work in and could we read? Okay? So let's start with the question, what is Coptic?
So Coptic is the last phase of the ancient Egyptian language. So this is the language of the pharaohs, but not in the time of the pharaohs. So the earlier systems used hieroglyphics, which we think of as being written in stone, but it could also be in papyrus. This system would require just for the most basic character set, not a phonetic character set. So a pictographic character set would require 300 to 500 characters just for the most basic, and it turns into thousands if you wanted to really master the language. And this was simplified at least twice. So hieratic and demotic were both simplifications of that. Demotic is the last before Coptic and was used in temples for tax receipts, occasionally for some literary texts, but mostly for recorded documents. Sometime probably, people argue about this, probably at the end of the 3rd century with the rise of Egyptian monasticism, which is, arguably the root of really all monasticism is Egypt and to some extent Styria. The Egyptian Christians, it's distinctly a Christian language, Coptic. They begin using the Greek alphabet. So not any of the pictographic systems, not the supposedly simplified system of Demotic. They use the Greek alphabet plus a series of additional letters, about 6 additional letters to derive from Demotic. They use that to write the ancient Egyptian language in the way an average person could read.
Now, the world had been sort of Hellenized by that time by Alexander the Great, and so that's why I guess they chose the character set that we find with Greek. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And it's hard for us to imagine this, but in antiquity in the Mediterranean, most people spoke more than one language probably. And so you're either, depending on which side of the Mediterranean you're living in, speaking Greek or Latin, maybe Aramaic in some places as a kind of lingua franca. And then you'd have whatever language was your local language. A lot of people had 2 names, a Greek name, a Coptic name,
Oh, no, see, I don't think I'd heard
or at
that.
least Egyptian name. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what kinds of texts were written in Coptic? I mean, early Christian texts, you talked about the Coptic folk were Christians in Egypt. And you mentioned the fact that they developed this language, unique language, but they also developed some unique books too, as well. Or could we say, translations of other books, maybe biblical books?
Yes. Coptic is, again, matter of debate. Coptic is a translational language and not a language of composition. That really anything we can pretty much presume that everything is composed in Greek or some other language until 6th century, maybe even later. So Greek is playing the role as the forensic language, the language of the marketplace, and also the literary language that you would write things in. And this goes back to why somebody would use the Greek alphabet to do it. So our earliest text, which is to say text from the 4th century, and people date manuscripts before the 4th century, at least papyri, Christian papyri, they're usually just making stuff up. There's not any secure reason to date things too much before the 4th century. Our earliest securely dated Coptic texts, which date as early as our Greek texts, are either going to be Bible or they're going to be some other kind of Christian literature that shows up. Now, most famously, the Nag Hammadi library, but also things that are associated with that library. More recently, the Gospel of Judas showed up with the Chalkos Codex, and we've got similar manuscripts from Oxford, England, and Berlin.
So everybody needs to rush right now to Wikipedia or someplace. In fact, what is Nag
Yes.
Hammadi exactly?
Naughty.
But to really understand the early church, you've got to start with Greek, right?
Yes.
You need as well. You need some Hebrew in there and probably Aramaic as
Yes.
well. But then, as you move a little bit through history, knowing and having a working knowledge of Coptic becomes pretty important.
And it depends what you want to do. I would say there's a kind of trinity of early languages. The most important is Latin. If you're especially a New Testament scholar, you really need to learn Latin. Obviously, Hebrew for the Old Testament, things like that. The second most important is Syriac because of the sheer volume of literature. The fact that you're reading Aramaic, and I think Syriac gives you some versatility to read even Old Testament texts that are written in Aramaic because it's really is the same. Coptic is the third of importance, and this is true for textual criticism too, because of it. Many of the manuscripts are actually very poorly preserved and they're shattered, and we all Coptologists must put them back together. This has to do with how Genizes and monasteries functioned. But if you're interested in ancient heresiology, though, I would say all of a sudden Coptic is really probably the most important language to learn. In fact, some scholars might get away with only doing Coptic
And not knowing the other ones as
heresiology.
well.
Yeah.
Well, as I know there's a lot of loan words, it seems like, between Greek and Coptic, right?
Very nice. Yes.
So if you know some Greek, it makes it a little bit easier. If you already know Greek, it makes it a little bit easier
Yeah.
to get into the Coptic. But you do have new letters, you do have different sounds, and you have different kind of grammar issues to work with.
This is interesting. There's a project in Israel right now. I'm thinking of writing this up or somehow presenting this, even though it's not my research, but presenting it as their research. Had a scholar at the conference in Belgium that I was just at, the International Association of Coptic Studies, and they're doing a loanword project with a history of Egyptian. And obviously we have Greek loanwords in there, but you have Semitic loanwords in ancient Egyptian. And the Semitic loanwords, we would expect them to show up at a time period where we know that Egypt was dominated by the Hyksos, a Levantine. Not the Hebrews, but a people from Creeper group from the same area, which would put it, in, I don't know, say the 18th century BC or something like that. It actually shows up right around the 14th century, when people would suggest that the children of Israel are there. And so we have some words even in Coptic that still hang out and they survive, like the word for the sea, because you have a sea in the middle of Egypt called the Fayum. It's yom, like the Hebrew word.
The Hebrew word for
So you do have
sea.
occasional bits of things that sound like Hebrew in there, like the word for water is mao, maim. So
Interesting. Well, we want to encourage people to learn Greek and Latin and Coptic and Hebrew and Aramaic, all those things, and that's very manageable because you've done it. I mean, you've done it. You've done it. If you can do it, anybody can do it, right?
yes.
Same thing. Listen, thanks for being with us today, Christian, on Exegetically Speaking.
It's my pleasure to be here. I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
If you learned too much today and your head is hurting, there's one sure cure. That is to share this podcast with a friend. We hope you've enjoyed Exegetically Speaking. If you have never visited Wheaton College, I hope you'll make plans to do so. We have a wonderful campus year around. And if biblical languages are your fancy, check out our MA and BA programs at Wheaton College, wheaton.edu. Look for modern and classical languages. That's the best place to get started. If you have comments, you have questions, you just want to be in touch, please email us at exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for all those who make this possible. You know who you are. Until next time, thanks for listening.